Okay, this is part two on this new article on Nabta Playa. If you missed it and haven't seen part one, go to the very end of this video and click in your top left hand corner and it'll show you part one, and then at the end of it, click in the top left hand corner and it'll come to this video. All my videos are set up that way, guys. Windorf himself had a powerful experience that cemented his belief in this idea. And what we were talking about is the astronomy of Nabta Playa and everything, and how the ancient used this probably to navigate from pond to pond, from place to place. And they would pick out a star and go with it, and knowing what direction those were in from having done it before and developing trails and things like this. But they came to drive back real late one night and didn't really know the area and could get lost in the desert, so they let that Bedouin drive, and he took the wheel navigating across the Sahara, but he was doing it by sticking his head out of the window to use the star as a guide. This kind of celestial navigation would have made Nabta Playa's stone circle a powerful symbol to the ancient nomadic people. It would have been like a map and an atlas and all of these type of things, right? The stone's feet would have been covered by seasonal water and would have been visible from the western lakeshore. You would watch the reflection of the stars off the dark waters of the lake, and you could see the stones partly submerged in the water, lining up with the reflections of the stars on the horizon, he says. That paints a pretty picture there. Ancient breadbasket of Egypt. Well, practically speaking, the megaliths should have also helped the people of Nabta Playa time the rainy season, which only became more important as the society developed over thousands of years. The summer solstice would have coincided with the arrival of the annual monsoons and rains, so tracking the sun's location could have tipped them off to the coming wet season. And here we see a man holding up sorghum grains. Now, sorghum is sorghum Sudan, and it's really a type of hay. And whenever I used to work on a ranch down in Waco, we used to have to actually farm this type of hay, and then we would end up baling up this type of hay. Then you had to go back out there again and stand up these green bales that were heavy as hell and let them sit there for a week or so and dehydrate enough to where you could go out and buck them up onto a trailer, which is just a flat trailer, and you build a whole thing on the fat trailer of them, and then you ride that all the way back to a hay barn and throw it all in there, and you do that over and over and over again and build up a huge amount of hay that'll help feed all your cattle for the entire year to come. It's pretty amazing. But what we had there was sorghum Sudan. It was a red-topped cane, and so the top was like millet, and then the rest of the stalk is what's really made into the hay that they eat and so on, right? But you get birds out there on massive flocks. And I remember going down there, and the statement was to the staff that we were going to go hunting and taking the afternoon off. But in reality, what we were going to go do is take a bunch of the kids down there with rifles, and we're basically going to try to scare them off the property, because this was in an area called the Bottoms, which contained over 100 acres. And there had gotten to be a whole bunch of these blackbirds, grackles types in there, and they were ruining the hay. And not that we lived off of the millet that was out of there, but we ended up selling the millet to help to pay for range cubes, which contain millet and a bunch of other stuffs and vitamins and things, and you use that as a kind of a treat food along with the hay to keep them going and stuff off of it. So, but what's weird about it is the oldest form, and he's going to tell you in a minute, that they found is a cultivated form already, and showing you that it, just like the cattle that were brought there and everything else, is actually a cultured form of plant brought into Egypt. The first strong evidence for people at Nabta Playa appears around 9000 BC. At the time, the Sahara was a wetter, more pleasant place to live. Eventually, there was enough water that people could even dig wells and build homes around them. One site excavated at Nabta Playa revealed rows of huts with hearths, storage pits, and wells that were spread out over thousands of square feet. The team of archaeologists called it a well-organized village. And these are the proto dynastic Egyptians, if you will. Amazing Caucasians. If you want, at the very end of this video, I can show you that the earliest of Egyptians were blue-eyed Caucasians. You can just look up blue-eyed Caucasians in Google image and our blue-eyed scribes, and it'll show you the earliest dynasties and how they looked, and then these crystallized and everything to them, and they always were. But between 5,000 and 3,000 BC, thousands of years after the stone circle was built at Nabta Playa, the region dried out again. Some researchers think that this environmental stress could have forced the people of Nabta Playa to develop a complex society, which most scholars thought depended on the development of agriculture, right? But it looks like there's already agriculture going there. And so they wanted to say, well, they went through stress and they invented farming. And it looks like, no, man, they were already having farming, because why are they doing the seasons of the year and everything that goes along with it? If they can do that, they can do farming. It's not a complex thing to go past it for these Caucasians that heralds civilization. For when they found out people started farming, they said prognathism leaves everybody. They're non-prognastic. They don't have a jaw that sticks out forward like sub-Saharans do and things like that, because they had never had farming or agriculture or anything before. But you look at Cro-Magnon man back at 38,000 BC, and he's non-prognastic. So the ancient society studied the constellations and understood the movements of the night sky. They made sacrifices and worshiped gods. They made jewelry out of cow bones. They ground up pigments for body painting, which is usually red ochre. Has been used in red ochre burials all the way through that time. Red ochre painting of people on the walls and in front of you themselves. You can see red ochre males and pale females basically depicted in Greek art all the time, but also can see it in Minoan, Mitanni, the Etruscans, and all kinds of people around this area here, where they would show males as being somewhat tanned, having to do all the work, that warrior guy, and the female is able to stay pale and fair-skinned because of that. Well, has that been squinched in too far, all this video? So the ancient society studied those constellations. They made jewelry. They did all kinds of things, made pigments for body painting. Researchers even discovered fish carvings at the site that suggest the nomads traded as far away as the Red Sea, which is another 20, depending on where you go across that, 20 to 30 miles to where on the other side of the Nile. Then you'd also, of course, have to cross it. Some of which finally, the stone slabs at that site that we've been looking at that were standing up, some of which stand 9 feet tall, had to be dragged from more than a mile away. However, this complex culture seems to have fallen somewhere in between nomadic and agrarian. In addition to the oldest astronomical site, Nabta Playa is also home to the oldest known remains of sorghum. That's the hay, Sudan. A crop first domesticated in Africa that's now one of the world's most important foods, especially for the tropics. But whenever they find it, it appears that it's already domesticated. Listen, hundreds of sorghum seeds were found at Nabta Playa, and they appear to be more closely related to domestic sorghum than wild varieties. Now, they found these in the burials and stuff, so they're saying that the oldest ones they found of it, it's already been cultured and domesticated quite a bit. These people knew what they were doing. So it looked different than the wild varieties. It is different and more plentiful. Millet, another crop critical to the global agricultural history, was also domesticated in the region, and excavations at Nabta Playa also turned up storage pits for grass seeds, tubers, legumes, and fruits. So they had all kinds of little storage areas built into it too. It's pretty neat. The nomadic people likely ate wild foods, but also planted some semi-domesticated crops along the lake shores at the beginning of each wet season. Then they moved on after the harvest, Melville says, and when they'd come back, it would all be grown up. So they could do that and do certain things in both places and probably get it all going on and start to eat fish more in this season and this and that season a little bit and do that hunter-gatherer thing and have a very good diet because of all that working together. The African sorghum and millet seeds domesticated in this area would eventually spread along the trade route stretching through the Red Sea and into India, where they arrived some 4,000 years ago and went on to play an important role in the development of numerous civilizations. And what the hell would hay be good for? People don't eat hay. Well, they can eat the millet. You can even make bread out of it if you want to, but wheat and things are so much better. But over and above that, if you're going to have cattle, you need hay. You've got to feed them, and it takes a lot of food and stuff, and this is a lot of food with the right things in it, and works great for them. It's fantastic. And so let's look into this next part here where they talk about black Genesis. By that time, the people who first grew the seeds were gone. Some 1,500 years later, the region had dried out, becoming what is now Earth's hottest desert, the Sahara, which is also not true. It would be Death Valley is the hottest place on the planet, and I believe they consider it a desert. Therefore, that's not correct. Here, many areas, but it's still impassable, and oh my gosh, but, you know, here many areas don't see the rain for years. That changing local climate forced the people of Nabta Playa to disperse. Some archaeologists think these people likely traveled south into Nubia, or modern-day Sudan, as well as north into Egypt, and their migration would have taken place in the years just before the first pharaohs rose to power. Well, they thought that they may have gone towards the Horn of Africa and consolidated there with perhaps the place that some of these people were migrating back and forth to. And just eventually there was nothing to go forth, so you had to stay back. And this might lead to the idea of the land of Punt, of those Caucasian blue-eyed Egyptians, and the Horn of Africa. If you look up the definition of Caucasian race, it will tell you that they lived all over Asia and Europe and everything, all around the Mediterranean, North Africa, Egypt, and through the Horn of Africa. Not so much now at this time. And of course, the Ethiopians that the Greeks talk about and they say about in the Bible and everything aren't some admixed people living in a place that was called Abyssinia until recently. For if you just look up Herodotus' map, it shows you all these brown blotched areas where in the Iliad and Odyssey and all of their tales they tell you these people are Ethiopians, and that's not at all in any way, shape, or form even admixed people. But let's continue. This timing had led some scholars to suggest the event sparked a black genesis for the cultural development in Egypt. The only problem with that is Egypt has nothing to do with black people. In fact, the only black people in the area at the time were Nubians, and they showed up much later than we're talking about in any way, shape, or form, recorded or whatever. And Nubian A colony was killed off, and basically it's 400 years before the Egyptians even speak about them or any mention again for it again. And whenever they come back, they're listed as vile Nubian troglodytes. It means primitive, unaware, cave-dwelling or hoe-dwelling people. And they weren't allowed into Egypt by decree, and made decrees where you could, if you killed one and you cut off his hand, if you just brought them a black person's hand, you got money for it. I'm just being straightforward, guys. This isn't racist. This is thousands of years ago. It's not now. You don't have to get offended about it. It's not happening to anybody. It happened before. Are you even related to those people? No. No. This timing, though, had led people to believe that some of this black genesis, although he tells you here that, however, that idea is controversial. especially whenever everybody's telling you, well, the Egyptians weren't. So if you're trying to come up with this idea, Mr. Bluval, it doesn't work. In fact, a famous archaeologist was doing, and last year I did a video on this where he's got Bluval there, and he's doing a telling about how the Sumerians involved with and all these people and the grains all came in and how it all started it. And he turns around and he goes, if you want to try to make anybody black, you could pick maybe these, really kind of making a joke of him out of it. And then, of course, that would be the joke, because just after that he mentions how those people are Caucasians and the genetics proves it and this, that, and the other. But then he just goes back into his boats and drawings and everything he wants to talk about. But it was kind of funny that he poked at Bluval right there for that has no basis, in fact, in truth. And the people that are pushing this idea are recent West African primitives that didn't even know Egypt existed. But that's another video and a story altogether. Human remains at Nabta Playa seem to be from both Central African and Mediterranean descent. I'll have to look over that again. However, some consider an ancient Egyptian cow goddess named Hathor, a goddess of fertility, to be the smoking gun for this origin story. And because of the cattle and everything that goes with it, they go, no, here's your Egyptians. If these cattle-raising nomads did help establish the Nile Valley's first civilization, Windorf once told Discover, it could explain the religious significance that Egyptians attached to the cow and the cattle of the Old Kingdom. Well, at that time, they were pretty much the only people, along with Libyans, that actually had cattle. Shortly after then, the Phoenicians and the people of Carthage and all around North Africa had it too. But they were pretty much the lone gun happening right there, and none of that involved black people, by the way. This idea has legitimate proponents, including Malville. So he's saying Malville doesn't even agree with him, who says that many Egypt scholars he's talked to also like the idea of the Egyptian culture emerging out of Africa, rather than the so-called Fertile Crescent, as everybody knows and has pinpointed all the animals and everything comes from there, as others suggest. However, some conspiracy theorists have also run with the idea, adding a strange new layer, one of which has been debunked, suggesting that the arms of Nabta Playa's stone circle describe the distances to the stars they align with, and that the rock slab beneath the megalith is a map of our Milky Way galaxy even. For Melville and Windorf as well, who died in 2015, RIP, there's no need to invent such stories for Nabta Playa to be fascinating. In many years spent exploring the Sahara, Windorf and other archaeologists found that a number of stone circles, but they never again found anything remotely as cool or like Nabta Playa. And now that there's detailed photography of Earth's entire surface, Malville says it's only growing less likely that older and more complex astronomical sites are still hiding. And I don't know if he knows about Göbekli Tepe, but it doubles it here off of it. So here we have a thing on Stonehenge, and now he starts going off on Stonehenge, and I think we'll end this here, but go on to one other site where someone had shown some pictures and some related ideas. But you could tell how much more intricate and how much more huge the stones are that make up Stonehenge. And there's also a lot more of alignments and things. But over time, things develop. And it's perhaps a lot of these other lines the Egyptians didn't necessarily need. For the ones they really need are the ones coming into the monsoon and the flip of the year. And they've got it, right? It's all it really takes. But you make it sound simple. Well, yeah, it's not though, is it? For they have to have been paying attention for a long time, and somebody's got to pull that snap enough to figure it all out. And hey, this was going on last year and so on, but they've got to pass it on to their kids and everybody, and then everybody's got to keep it going. And it's quite a thing. You imagine things like that could get lost fairly easy. So here's the other one here that's on Nabta Playa. And here's what they found. The picture here of a pre-softened stone that's been smooth, not softened, smooth stone in the shape of a cow. They have another one that seems to be in the face of a falcon. How do you write about something that nobody seems to really know much about other than it exists? Well, this megalith was found 7 meters, about 23 feet of sediment deep at the Nabta Playa site. Now, one might be tempted to date the sculpture by the layer of sediment in which it was found, but we do know of instances where sacred sites were intentionally buried. Göbekli Tepe, for instance. This may be no different, and it could be an ancient pit wherever it was that they put it all the way down in there and stuff. But why would they have done such a thing? And if somebody wants to say it was a stone that was shaped like this and it got put up under some 23 foot of sediment, some people have said that would be over 30,000 years. Easily. Of course, they'd have to look at it and see how much of the sediment was sand and so on like that. It would come to a green Sahara where not much of that's happening, and then it would go back before the time before that where it's really happening, and some snowstorm or some sandstorms and things would carry the place up. So what does this block of stone represent? Well, I'm not sure we even know, but there are some good guesses. The most popular explanation is that it's a cow sculpture. Indeed, there are cow burials in the immediate area, and we do know that the cow worship was popular during the age of Taurus, approximately 4300 to 2100 BC, but it's a bit late based on our confirmed dates for the top layer of the site. However, it is believed that cow cults grew out of pre-dynastic fertility practices, probably from Nabta Playa and surrounding areas, so there may be connections here. When we think of cow worship, fertility cow goddesses, Hathor comes to mind, the Egyptian goddess of love, fertility, beauty, and joy. She's often depicted with cow horns on her head, or even as a cow herself. And here's an anthropomorphic version of this. But in a lot of depictions, it just shows a head that looks humanistic, but has cow ears on it, and it's kind of long-faced. There's another connection to cow worship. The Big Dipper was considered to be a bull's thigh in ancient Egypt. Yeah, the Big Dipper wasn't a cart for them because they didn't have the wheel of the cart and everything, but what they did was it looked like the outlines of chink, 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 well, like a butcher shop and you cut off a leg. And so there are signs that they have on the wall, and they're using this in symbols on it too, and I don't think a lot of people have really deciphered the fact that they're talking about the stars in certain situations whenever they have that leg up there. Right. And the stone circle discussed last installment has alignments to the Big Dipper. So it's likely that this association was also important to these ancient people. I can not help but to think also of the tarot key, the Fool. Right? The tarot cards of the gypsies, who carries memories in his pesky purse. And I know it's a small picture. Maybe I can zoom in on it a little here. Let me try to get this charger in here and see if I can zoom in on it. So if you look, it looks kind of like a hobo. But in reality, he has one of those purses that ironically look kind of like those Sumerian bags and so on. The Fool. Notice he has a dog with him too, by the way. Looking very Peter Pan-ish too. So she thinks of the tarot of the Fool, who carries memories in his pesky purse. The Hebrew letter assigned to this key is Aleph, and Aleph means ox or bull, and it's where we get the alphabet, or the alphabet from. For that's alpha, and the O symbol is the omega. Well, Z's the last letter. Nah, no, not an old name. No, no. Alpha and Omega, beginning and end. Huh. I could go on about that, but let's go ahead. The most intriguing theory is this. And so you look at this. This is a warped version of how the sky warps. You can see this square has been tweaked right around it. This is 40 minutes and 4 hours worth of declination of the galactic center path. Okay? The declination depicted is the path of motion of the galactic center of the Earth over the 26,000 precessional cycle. So there's this little warp that goes along with it. Now turn the cow sculpture around in your mind and compare that to the drawing above. And they want to compare it to that. And saying that not only did they have that going on, but what this is, as they're saying in the time of Taurus, they had figured out this declination. I don't know if I can go along with that, but I see what she's saying. So if the sculpture is meant to represent the path of the galactic center over the precessional cycle, wow, what is the protrusion on the left, right of the sculpture is viewed from the back? It must mean that something, and perhaps it does, because it points to the direction from which we came, the galactic center, at the vernal equinox sunrise in 17,700 BC. What? Remember, Göbekli Tepe Pillar 43 also targets the galactic center, but at the winter solstice in our own time, or not long ago in the zodiac. And we'll see that the bedrock sculpture under the cow also points to the galactic center in 17,700 BC, reinforcing the notion that this alignment is not a coincidence, but more on that next time. And so I'm kind of intrigued with what they found out of this. And there's references from Brophy Thomas and these other people in origin maps. And this is here Nabta Playa that's being shown in here. And Robert Bivall in his book on Black Genesis and so on that he's tried to put out. For he's tried to claim that black people built the pyramids and then disappeared and blonde-haired people showed up. And the reality of it all is that these were blonde-haired people, blue-eyed. Not all of them, of course. From the pre-dynastic times, you can see that very well in the pre-dynastic Ghibelline mummy known as Ginger. It's found in the British Museum to this day. But there's a lot more to it than that. Let's see where we're at. 27 minutes. Well, hell. Let's just go see some of this. Let's kill this and just go to Google. So I'm going to go to Google, and you can do this too if you want in your own time. Blue-eyed Egyptians. And you'll find that there's lots of images of the oldest dynasties, but let's just click images. I hate this new format for it's real small, but here are some of the earliest statues of the earliest dynasties here. And this is Hor-Aha. He would have effectively been the second pharaoh ever. There's the picture of Nefertiti. It's kind of famous. You can make out she lost her eye here, but still has one blue eye left here. But this was found in a tomb that's along with 12th dynasty people, and so they say it went all the way through the 12th dynasty of them people using these crystal blue eyes. For you can see, you can't really make it out here, but Nofret and Rahotep here of the earliest dynasties, and you can make out that she's clearly a Caucasian, and him too. I have crystal blue eyes, and this is earliest of scribes. He's known as the seated scribe. Here's another one here known as Mitri, and there's the way that King Tut looked and so on. But even in pre-dynastic Naqada series 2, before the pharaohs, they find these gold foil statues, stand about a meter tall, and they're made to look like Caucasians and big eyebrows and things with Caucasian ears and lapis lazuli eyes with a little hole cut in the center of them like you would do a bead to string up on a necklace, but instead they're used for eye inserts. And again, these are the oldest of dynasties, and you can't really make it out in here, but They show some pharaohs that have red and blonde hair, including Thuya and Yuya, great grandparents of King Tut, and so on. And here, crystal blue eyes also. So that's who the founders were of ancient Egypt. And then we have the Sumerian statues showing you the same exact type of thing, but it could go deeper than that. For we have Egypt, Sumeria, but in Peru statues, a lot of their gods are shown with beards appendaged on, and they don't grow facial hair and blue eyes. And even Buddha, Gautama Buddha himself, is said to have been blue eyes and a round eye and so on. So there's just a quick look at it. One more look, that Thuya and Yuya I was talking about. I've got a page pulled up here that I haven't thrown away yet, just for this purpose. So why don't we use it? There's crystal eyes you can see growing across the top. But here we are with Thuya and Yuya. This is King Tut's great-grandmother and great-grandfather here. And so we're looking here, and what does his mummy look like? Are they not? Well, it used to be right there. Continue reading. Funny, those pictures are gone, but I've put them in a bunch of other videos. There's a picture of her in black and white. Here she is in color with her blonde hair. Yeah, this long hair statue. So there's another picture of her here. It has that slide over bat that King Tut does too. Here was a picture of her CAT scanned and her hair, and you can tell that's Caucasian hair, of course, too. And there we go. So there's Thuya and Yuya, and you can see his blonde hair that's on it. So anyhow, guys, we're just going to let it go there. For that'll about do it there. They started with it. The important part, Ramses is a redhead, leading up into King Tut, blonde-haired grandparents, both of them. That's enough. Anyhow, guys, let me know what you think about Nabta Playa and what they've said about it. And then, of course, you can tell this secondary person is a little bit more on the fringe. Peace.